so pleased to have with us America's lawyer, Mike Papantonio, attorney with Levin Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire Radio, ringofireradio.com. Hey, Pap, how you doing?
How are you, Tom?
I'm well. It's always great having you on. So, wild stuff going down there in Florida. I don't understand how Rick Scott can even be competitive given this guy's history. Is it that the newspapers aren't covering it?
Well, they've covered it, but they haven't covered the story behind the story. When they talk about the fact that Rick Scott committed fraud, serious fraud, Medicaid fraud, TRICARE fraud, Medicaid fraud, and that he had to plead the Fifth Amendment 75 times so he wouldn't go to prison, that's only the top of the story. The story is, what did he do? And what he did was, if a person would show up at this clinic, at the HCA clinic, they would take a sprained hand and then they would they would upcoat it to where it looked like a broken arm. So all of a sudden, the billing goes from a sprained hand to a broken arm. And so that's how he made money. He would do, the organization would do laminectomies that weren't required. They would do CT scans that 10 other doctors would say, there's no need for a CT scan. They simply drained Medicaid, TRICARE, Medicare as much as they could. And the number's probably closer to $3 billion, but they only got fined for $1.7 billion. Wow. And so people don't understand what it means to commit this caliber of fraud. They made stuff up, Tom. You would have a patient show up with, I'm here for just a checkup. And before they left, that patient was having migraine headaches and suspected of having a brain tumor, that type of thing. And so but nevertheless, the story's out there, but the media's done a very poor very poor job explaining it.
Yeah. Your thoughts on Charlie Crist as a candidate?
Well, I think right now it's a dead heat. I mean, it's anybody's call right now. The more we're seeing of Rick Scott right now, the more we're asking. Finally, the Florida voters are asking some serious questions. When Governor Scott cornered Rick Scott on his death penalty stands, what we're starting to see is this pattern. We saw Rick Scott respond, first of all, trying to ignore it, and then looking like a deer in headlights. He gave that same look that you see 75 times in the depositions that he gave, where he's trying to stay out of prison. But it's kind of that 1,000-yard stare. It's the blinking, it's the stammering, it's the stuttering, because he simply knows that he's caught. And that's the brand that Rick Scott has right now. So what the media is trying to do, what his camp is trying to do, is keep him out of the media. They don't want him in front of cameras. This was the last debate. They feel relieved by that. So relieved that Rick Scott has put $22 million of his own money into the race, and he's hoping that he can stay out there without physically being out there, because he is such an oddball. I mean, he has this down here. They call it the geek factor, the creep factor. When you look at him, women just run from him. I mean, his women vote down here is he's in really bad shape because of what he projects, and it's odd to have a candidate like that won the first time to begin with. But Charlie Crist is a pretty competitive character, and but it's a tough race.
Yeah, I had Charlie Crist on this show, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago or so. He was live here in the studio with us, and I was very impressed by him. He came across as one of the adults in the room.
Yeah, well, he actually cares about people, and Rick Scott cares about his billionaire pals that are propping up his campaign. And one thing we need to know about Rick Scott, for example, is we need to know what his financials are. He won't release his financials, won't do it, and he says he can't do it because all of his millions are in his wife's blind trust. Well, the reason they want to see this, voters want to see it, is because he's giving all these sweetheart deals to offshore drillers. He's giving all these sweetheart deals to frackers that are destroying, potentially going to obliterate the Okeechobee, that whole area around Okeechobee. Yeah. And so we want to know, or the prisons. What's his financial interest in privatizing prisons or privatizing school. And we know that there's something going on. Everybody knows it. But he's been able to hide his financials so we can't find out. In the media, again, so what? 25 years ago, that would have been the thing that everybody was talking about. How dare you hide your financials and say that your money's in a blind trust and you can't let us know how much money you're spending on things like oil research, exploration, or the prison system or education. We have a right to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another demonstration, I think, of the way that Republicans win, or at least the Republican strategy for their path to winning, is either by deflecting people's attention from real issues with bright, shiny things. If somebody made a gaffe, Allison Lundgren Grimes won't say that she voted for Obama. Oh, my God, let's turn that into that's what the race is going to turn on. Either A, or B, actually preventing people from voting. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was quite outspoken about this Friday night, Saturday.
Well, yeah, the Supreme Court, it's a disaster what we're seeing with the Supreme Court. Several years ago, 4 years ago, we might have been reasonable to believe that the SCOTUS majority of Roberts, Scalia, Thomas, Alito, and Kennedy, that we suspected they were Republican hacks. But we might have thought there was some reasonable, plausible reason for them to come forward with the judicial methodology that they were coming forward with. There was some precedent. And we might have thought, well, maybe they're trying to do the right thing. Today, you'd have to be mentally challenged not to see that this SCOTUS majority is simply there to protect dead, dying, gray, feeble remnants of a struggling Republican Party. I mean, the white sheets have come off their head. I mean, that's just the truth. Yeah. We see no talent, no character for these majority party hacks. And we know what they are. They're there to deliver for Republican bosses. The facts speak for themselves. You have 15 states, for the first time, 15 new states in 2014 that faced brand new restrictions for the first time in midterm elections, completely designed to make the act of voting difficult for blacks, Hispanics, disabled, elderly, things like this. You can't vote at this poll place because if you do, your vote will be completely nullified. You might be carrying a military ID, but that's not enough. You need a special ID that comes from us or you can't vote. So you have thousands, tens of thousands of people that are registered to vote. They've been voting for years with the same registration. They might be military, active military, and they're being told, gee, you can't vote because you don't have that special card. In Texas, as you know, the Fifth Circuit determined that it was just fine to tell 600,000 registered voters that they couldn't vote because they didn't have this new improved voter ID card.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, if Democrats had prevented veterans from voting, the Republicans would be screaming about this. Why are the Democrats not jumping down Rick Perry's throat for saying that a military ID isn't good enough for voting, but a gun license is?
Tom, they don't have a backbone.
Oh yeah,
they don't. I mean, I've said it before. The Democratic Party is in shambles. They simply don't have a backbone. They don't know how to deliver a message. And when they try to deliver a message, they usually screw that up. They can have all this great material to deliver, but leadership is awful. From Obama's office all the way down to the triple DC running these state elections, they are awful. And for some reason, we won't admit that they're awful. We let them perpetuate.
We need to get some better people in there. America's Lawyer, Mike Papatoni. Thanks, Pat, for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.